exhibition and Symbiotic Futures. We'll be speaking with 4 panelists today. I'm so excited to have them already. I've got like a sneak preview, so that's been great. And then we're going to follow that up with dialogue and questions. So just a little bit for anyone joining that doesn't know. WEED, Women Eco Artist Dialogue, was founded in 1996. It's volunteer run collective of female identifying artists, writers, curators, art historians, researchers, scientists, and others interested in highlighting the intersection of art and ecology and those issues politically and socially. I got some sage burn in here for us. I'm in the exhibition committee and board member. I'm Leah Dalton. We're joined here today with Mary White and exhibition committee members Christina Bertia and Deanna Pendel. And just thank you for joining. We're happy to have you. Mary, take it on.
All right. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. And we'd like you to type in the chat where you're from if you'd like to. WEED's office sits on the territory of the Huichen, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chichoneo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Barona Band of Alameda County, near one of the largest shell mounds in the Bay Area, which is about 4 blocks from the office. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Mwakme Ohlone tribe and other familiar descendants of the Barona Band. We recognize the Uwigmak Ohlone tribe who are campaigning to become federally recognized, the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone who are researching, revitalizing, and preserving Ramaytush Ohlone history and culture, and the Confederated Villages of Lejeune and the Segorite Land Trust who are working to return native land back to Indigenous stewardship. Now I have a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. We're recording this session. Please keep your audio muted during the presentation. The hosts may mute you if there's extra noise. If you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat for the questions section. We will stop the first recording, maybe we'll just continue, I think, with one recording. And then at the end of the panel, we'll have questions and answers. So I'd like to introduce board member Christina Bertia, who organized single-handedly this entire panel and who will host the panel discussion. Take it away, Christina.
Thank you. I'm delighted that this is happening. Welcome to WEED's Art and Science panel, What Can Symbiotic Futures Look Like? This is the final programming for our online exhibition, Lands and Symbiotic Futures, which ends on January 31st. We will start with Maru Garcia, the exhibition juror who is both an artist and a scientist. She'll say a few words about the concept of symbiosis and her experience jurying. And not to worry, she'll discuss her own work with organisms such as kombucha SCOBIES and algae later in the panel. So welcome, Maru.
Thank you so much, Christina, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm very happy to be able to talk about one of my favorite themes, which is how can we enter in relationship with the other, within ourselves, with the ones that are around us, but also with the rest of the parts of the ecosystem where we inhabit. So I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna very briefly talk about the exhibition. If you haven't had the chance to take a look, it was mentioned that when is the deadline for accessing? So I would recommend going and experiencing the AR experience. That it's actually pretty amazing. I've been probably in a couple of virtual exhibitions, and sometimes the virtual exhibition doesn't allow to really translate correctly the work. But I'm very happy how this exhibition came out, how the environment really kind of transports you to a gallery. And I am very happy, and I appreciate all the effort that was behind putting that, because I'm sure that it took a lot of effort to put it out as it is. So just very briefly, as Christina mentioned, I'm going to talk more later about the concept of what is of symbiosis and what is symbiosis for me. Which you will see that I usually just encapsulate it in the word relationships. But I wanted to just bring to the conversation some of the things that I wrote for the curatorial statement for the exhibition that I was thinking at that time more in the land part. And I am really happy that we are ending this with this event, the symbiotic part, which I won't say that it's different or divided, but it's how we put emphasis in one or the other. So in my case, I started thinking more in soil, and the reason is because I've been really having a lot of work related with soil contamination, unfortunately, urban soils, and the relationship of soil with us through gardening practices and through regenerative practices. And for me, so far, my experience, this relational experience with soil is that soil is mother. And that has also been present and probably was very important for me in the phase in my life that I'm right now having. Last year, I had my baby, and it's been moving a lot of things inside me. And I felt that it was really beautiful to acknowledge that part, and having the opportunity to see all the work made me go back to that relation. So as a living material, it's a living life-giving material. And I like very much the root of mother as matter, in Spanish, madre. And this is the vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, as we all know, animals, and us humans. And soil feeds us, filters our water, captures carbon, and helps regulate Earth's temperature. And what I was seeing in the work that was presented, or that people were submitting for this exhibition, I saw a lot of the common thread on trying to bring the complexity of soil, um, bringing soil as an ecosystem, bringing our attention to all the different elements that are part of it, minerals, microbial communities, creatures that live in the soil, that demonstrate that soil is alive. And I saw a lot of beauty, a lot of wanting to highlight the importance of soil. And in the other side, we also have this reality that we have to face with climate change, with land degradation, with ecosystems degradation. So we had to face also the ugly. And I felt that the artists that participated did it so well. Showing how soil has been degraded through extractive development. It has been losing all the valuable nutrients, microbial diversity, releasing carbon into the atmosphere, doing the opposite as what it was intended. And it's been destroyed. There is a lot of stories about the impacts of the industries, the mining, the agricultural industry, and how we are just basically converting this ecosystem in toxic waste. So some other things that, in my journey around soil and land, took me is that it's very concerning that the current rate of soil degradation outpaces the regeneration of soil. Unfortunately, all the problems that I was mentioning are really happening super fast. And researchers have found that it takes around 10,000 years to form 3 feet of soil. So imagine the speed in which we are destroying this valuable ecosystem. So as I was mentioning, the call to action, the the artists that are part of the exhibition are talking about the beauty, about the problems, but I saw a lot of call to action, and I love that because I feel that as artists we have that responsibility to create this change in the narratives, create these changes that are needed in our society, and art is really good at transforming what is not working currently. So there was a lot of also artists working with interdisciplinary platforms, artists working outside the laboratory, outside, inside the specific installations, performance, and bringing together the scientific to the poetic and what I call everything in between. So I think that I will end up there, but this is another invitation for you to get into the exhibition and enjoy all this fascinating work that all these artists put together. And thank you. I'll pass it back. Let me stop sharing. There you go.
Thank you,
Pass it
Maru.
back.
So next we'll have Kate Lundquist. She is an artist, ecologist, shameless biophiliac, and beaver restoration professional. She co-directs the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center's Water Institute and their Bring Back the Beaver campaign. She works to implement beaver and process-based restoration to conserve watersheds, recover endangered species, increase water security, and build resilience to climate change. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much, and greetings to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we are. Beautiful art of Suzanne Husky, who is doing amazing things for the beaver people right now. So, as Christina said, I am with the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. We are a nonprofit based in Western Sonoma County, though we work all over the West and the world, as it turns out. And but we have an 80-acre demonstration site here where we practice, demonstrate, and build capacity for communities to live well on the land and integrate arts and ecology in a just way as we're facing all of these wild times with climate change. And so our theme is with their Beaver campaign and with the Water Institute in general is we're doing collaborative restoration from ridgeline to reef. And we're working with the humans and all species in this effort, and beaver being one of them for sure. And as you can see from all of the different logos at the bottom, we collaborate with a lot of different folks in different spaces, from agencies to tribal entities to nonprofits and communities all over. And so that's what we're doing. And this is who I'm going to talk about today, our beloved beaver, Castor canadensis. There are only two species in the world. Castor canadensis is the North American beaver, and Castor fiber is the Eurasian. So only native to the Northern Hemisphere. So that is our focus. We're not focusing on the Global South because they are not native there. And that doesn't mean we're not focusing on other solutions for the Global South, but just want to clarify that. And they are an amazing species, have all of these incredible adaptations. This version of beaver, as far as we can tell, has been around for 8 million years and has made these amazing adaptations, from their webbed hind feet to swim well, their paddled tail to balance and regulate their temperature and store fat for the winter, eyes that have goggles so they can see underwater, a little split toenails so that they can groom their pelts and put oil throughout it. And they live in colonies of a breeding pair and young. They have small litters, 4 beaver generally every year, and they stick around for 3 years. So they're unusual for a rodent in that they have these family units. So they are what we consider to be a keystone species because they create these wetland complexes to protect themselves. They do all of their work in the water, but they need to have these dry lodges to sleep in and groom in and take care of their young and feed and whatnot. And so having as much deep water around them as possible is what helps keep them alive and safe from predators. And in so doing, these building and maintaining of these wetlands, they create all this amazing aquatic habitat for many, many other species, many of which are endangered species in California, including our coho salmon and our Sierra Nevada willow flycatcher, sage grouse, cascades frogs, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you work with a species like beaver, you get to really leverage their effort to create all of this incredible habitat and protect all of these other species, which is really exciting. So these dam complexes that they create actually improve water quality and basically trap nutrients and build soils, because they're basically creating these traps, these sediment traps. What we're looking at here is in South Lake Tahoe. It's one of the remaining intact beaver wetlands of that scale. This is what Tahoe Keys used to look like before they developed it. And it is got dozens of beaver dams in there, and it has been shown through scientific study to be trapping all kinds of nutrients that degrade the water quality in Lake Tahoe. So it's beaver that are keeping Tahoe blue. They are trapping that phosphorus, and they are rehydrating this wetland and creating all of this amazing aquatic habitat. And again, these wetlands, with all of these speed bumps that they create canals, they create dams, they have all of these different habitat modifications they do. They hold water longer. And for those of us that are in a Mediterranean climate, having something that will retain water longer into our dry season is a really important strategy to build resilience to drought, fire, climate change, and all of the things that, it's not that we're always water scarce, it's that we're storage scarce. And beaver wetlands are a better, more ecologically resilient place to store water than human dams. So here we have some images of some beaver complexes. What they do with all these multiple dams that they create and pass down to generation after generation is create this wetland oasis that builds in resilience. And so they become speed bumps to flooding. They help slow that water down, spread it out, sink it, store it, share it, and really take the energy out of our storm waters, our high energy waters that we're getting more and more of. And then also, again, the storage element of keeping it there longer, so making it more resilient to drought. And they're much more resilient to wildfire. So the image on the right is of a catastrophic wildland fire where the beaver wetland was the only thing that didn't burn. And this is really uncommon. There's been some studies, which Emily Fairfax, which is what is cited there, and her co-author Whittle looked at. And sure enough, it turns out in these large landscape scale fires where there are beaver wetlands, they are proving to be much more resilient and providing these refugia, not only for humans, but for many, many other species during wildfires. So that's really helpful. We want to make sure we keep our beaver on the landscape for that purpose. So we're really focused on beaver restoration here at the Arts and Ecology Center, and really building people's literacy to understand what that means and how we can do that holistically in a variety of symbiotic actions. And so this is kind of the little flow here: coexistence, enhancement, expansion, mimicry, and relocation. And so coexistence, we have beaver in California. They're native to California. They've been here all along. Thankfully, they weren't extirpated, though they were nearly trapped out. We ended up with only 1,000 left before they were protected in the early 1900s. Their fur is very valuable for making felt, hats, coats, all of the things. And so the fur rush came before the gold rush, and that's had a huge impact on our waterways in California. So we have all of these strategies for living with beaver. Beaver like to gum up, they like to cut down our favorite trees. They like to gum up, our waterways, canals, ditches. They eat expensive ag crops. They do all the things that drive landowners crazy, but we have all of these solutions readily available that are low cost to implement to live with them. We can even go further in our restoration spaces and look at, do we have a way that we can actually enhance what they're doing and help accelerate their wetland creation process? So here's an example near Sacramento in the town of Lincoln, where started putting in posts to reinforce the dam so they would last longer, giving the beaver more time and space and energy to expand the wetland. And here's an overhead photo. So this is what expansion looks like. It used to be this tiny dry area that had a single threaded channel, little creek up there in the upper left, and convinced the landowners to stop killing the beaver because they were eating their restoration planting. Like, no, don't kill your restoration partner. Let's keep them around. You're like missing the boat here. So they agreed. And how about we go the other direction? You've got the space. We'll tear down some levees. We will reinforce their dams. We'll add some more dams in between their dams, beaver dam analogs. And within a 5-year period for $75,000 is all it cost. And that was mostly for the excavator to remove the levees. They're able to increase the wetland area by 1,800%. And this is now a biodiversity hotspot in the middle of the Sacramento Valley. Super important. And so in places where we don't have beaver yet, or where it's not appropriate for them to return, we can mimic beaver and build these beaver-like structures, beaver dam analogs, post-assisted log structures. This is my partner, Kevin, on the left here. He runs a company that does this year round, and it's really helpful and really accelerates the restoration pace. And in places where they have been absent and there's good habitat, we can relocate, which we did do after 75 years, finally, this last fall with our tribal partners up in with the Mighty Summit Consortium and the Tule River Tribe. We have a whole network of us that are really excited about this beaver and process-based restoration, partnering with species and elements to restore ecological function. And art is playing a really important role in this whole work that we are doing. We're really grateful for our artist partners like Suzanne Husky, who has just created a whole book with Baptiste Moritzo, all about partnering with beavers to return water to the landscape. Check this out. Super important. You too can get out there and check out the beaver. Go on to iNaturalist, get inspired, make observations. That beaver are recorded all over the Northern Hemisphere, and it's a great resource for finding out where they are. And we have a lot of community groups here in California that are starting to get behind beaver, and they also are really wonderful to collaborate with. They have a lot of opportunities for artists to contribute. We have resources online, great books. Eager is amazing. Our network, really important to learn about this. And we have our whole website that goes really in deep onto the work that we're doing with beaver across the state and across the world. We're partnering with France and Canada and all over Mexico. It goes on and on. So I'll stop there. I think I'm out of time, and I will pass it back to Christina.
Thank you so much, Kate. That's wonderful. Next up, we have Julia Cavici, who is a human geographer and explorer of how to reclaim our waste, how reclaiming our waste can fertilize social change. She is the education director at the Rich Earth Institute, a research nonprofit dedicated to reclaiming human waste as a resource for fertile farms and clean waters. She coordinates the You're in My Garden education program, local community outreach, youth workshops, and science communication. She also organizes the annual Rich Earth Summit. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Get my screen share in here. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about kind of a slightly different kind of symbiosis, which is what does it look like if we actually think about symbiotic relationships with our own waste and that as our relationship to the landscape. And I think it's kind of helpful to think of the framing of the ways in which throughout nature waste that one organism creates goes on to benefit other organisms in that ecosystem. Like we have decomposers and worms and fungi. And the nutrients from our own bodies are no different, in natural systems. But of course,
with our conventional systems, we've kind of done something different with our sewer and septic systems. But I thought I'd start with a few kind of questions of framing. Sometimes my colleagues and I talk about the potty as a portal between our bodies and the landscape. And just thinking about how symbiosis teaches us the permeable boundaries between self and other, and like, where does your body end and your watershed or foodscape begin? So gonna kind of plant those seeds as I talk through what we call the nutrient landscape. So with conventional waterborne sanitation systems, we talk about it as the flush and forget system, where we go in our toilets, flush them, and we think that our waste goes away. But of course, we know there is no such place as away, always somewhere, and our waste has consequences wherever it goes. And so our sewer systems and septic systems were originally designed to remove the organic matter and pathogens in our waste, but not the nutrients, as well as the other contaminants that get combined with our waste, largely from industrial processes like PFAS and other emerging contaminants. So the nutrients travel through these systems and end up accumulating in downstream water bodies, where they fertilize harmful algal blooms. And these blooms can then deoxygenate the water and result in mass fish kills. And they're increasing around the world as climate change is leading to heavier flooding events and overwhelmed wastewater systems, and more of these harmful algal bloom events. And so I think this is kind of a depiction of the entanglement between our bodies and the watershed that can happen in a negative way when we take our waste out of balance from the systems that it belongs in. So we think of all of this as part of the linear nutrient flow, where on the one hand, we're using extractive and often exploitative processes to procure the nutrients that we use in agriculture to grow the food that we feed our communities. And then we waste the excess nutrients from our bodies and flush them into clean, potable water and send them downstream where they cause pollution. So kind of not a super sustainable system, and not one that allows our bodies to flourish in symbiosis with the landscapes that nourish us in turn. So at Rich Earth and many other places around the world, we're working to reclaim what really is kind of an age-old practice of using our nutrients in local agricultural systems. So we call this the food nutrient cycle, where rather than becoming waste, the resources from our bodies can be reclaimed and put back into our local food systems, and that relationship can continue in perpetuity. And I think, one fun fact that Rich Earth has calculated is that on average, your body produces enough nutrients in the form of urine fertilizer to grow the wheat required to bake one loaf of bread, which I think is just a nice way of visualizing the potential for reciprocity between ourselves and the land, where the land can feed us in abundance what we need to thrive, and we can return those nutrients to the land. And Robin Wall Kimmerer has written guidelines for the honorable harvest that I think that this is kind of an example of, where she writes, "Give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken, sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever." And so I think what we're doing with returning our urine nutrients to the land is kind of one way of trying to embody that. So just a little about Rich Earth Institute. I won't go too deep into our actual work. You can find a lot more about this on our website. But we're really focused on supporting scales of change, of transforming our conventional sanitation and agricultural systems and into systems that are sustainable and nutrient cycling. And so we're doing this through home garden education, through community scale pea cycling programs, and also through building scale systems, particularly through a spin-off company that we have working on higher tech solutions. And so we do that through education, through social and agricultural research, and through technological development. So I think just to get into how is this a form of symbiosis, I thought I would look at legumes, which are naturally nitrogen fixing plants. And the way that these plants are nitrogen fixing is through their symbiotic relationship with bacteria, who can capture nitrogen out of the soil that's not in a plant available form and make it available to plants. Now, for other plants that don't have that symbiotic relationship with bacteria, we can actually be the form of symbiosis where the the nitrogen that comes out of our bodies in the form of urine is actually already plant available. So the plants can just take the nutrients from our pee right from the soil and use it to grow themselves. So we've actually calculated the NPK ratio of urine as a fertilizer, like any other fertilizer you might buy in a garden store, which is 0.6, 0.1, 0.2. And we have a lot more guidance on our website about how you can actually use urine as a fertilizer. But I think it's just cool to imagine how kind of we're playing a parallel role to those bacteria for the legumes. So just kind of how our program works in Brattleboro and other programs that we're working to support. We have a variety of ways that we help folks collect urine, whether through portable urine collectors that they bring to our central urine depots, or through urine diverting toilet installations, which we then bring back to our processing facility and treat. And really the backbone of this program is folks who sign up as volunteer urine donors to contribute their nutrients to our program. And I think that Symbiosis is kind of a part of one of the main reasons they sign up to voluntarily do something different with their urine than flush it into a toilet, which is that they can transform what society terms a waste into a vital resource, both for local farms and for protecting our local watershed. So I thought I'd share some voices and experiences from urine donors in our community to demonstrate this. This is just a couple images from a canoe trip that some colleagues and urine donors and I took down the Connecticut River, which is the river that we pee cycle to protect, or we collect our urine so that it doesn't enter this watershed and pollute it. So we did a project with our urine donors where we had them fill out postcards that were cyanotyped with water from the Connecticut River with some words about why they signed up to participate in this program. So this urine donor wrote, "The cycle goes round, it flows through me. That's one of the reasons I donate my pee. Any contained pee changes perception of bodily waste, of the cycle of nutrients feeding me, feeding the system, feeding new plants, feeding hope for new systems, more changes." I'm a urine donor because it reminds me to be grateful for every water body, including my own. And then all of the nutrients that we collect, we then bring to local farms to fertilize largely hay fields, but a lot of other kinds of crops as well. And so it's kind of the collective nutrients of these 260 different people that get combined to fertilize all of these different individual grasses throughout the field that then go on to feed cows, which may go on to produce milk or beef, which then get returned back into our community. So I thought I'd also include a quote from one of our farmer partners on his perspective of symbiosis. This was a farm we worked with that fertilizes primarily nut tree seedlings for producing kind of a perennial nut crop that can sustain our communities. And so he was talking about how he sees fertilizing with urine as one part of the symbiosis and coevolution of humans and plants. That through fertilizing with urine, we can provide this incredibly plant available form of nitrogen, which then can help grow these trees, which then once they mature can then return, and in return give us nuts perennially. So just a few kind of thoughts on the use of art in our work, and also a couple examples from other organizations we've worked with. I think one of the goals of the graphics Rich Earth creates are to help ease the transition from disgust to intrigue for people by kind of partly making visible infrastructure and the shadow places that are often obscured in our daily life. Like we don't often see images or drawings of our sewer systems or the downstream watersheds where our nutrients go. And also to build trust through professional drawing. So we're often talking to a lot of different kinds of people, both people in our community we want to sign up as urine donors, like this little banner we made, and then also a lot of kind of wastewater engineers and septic system installers. And so we have kind of really a broad lexicon of graphics that we pull from, I would say. This is a project created by a German eco-sand network called NetSan, which is really cool. Highly recommend checking out their website. It's called You Don't Know Shit, or maybe you do, where it depicts the entire kind of agricultural and sanitation landscape with little bubbles you can zoom into to learn more about different kinds of toilets and ecological problems happening in conventional landscapes versus in transformed landscapes. And it's a way of creating a new imaginary of what our symbiotic future could look like through this detailed drawing. These are some stickers Rich Earth has created. And I think part of our goal is to create a broad diversity of images because different aspects of this work speak to different people more strongly. So we're trying to encourage people to take what speaks most to them and become ambassadors through that perspective. These are some drawings from, I do a lot of school workshops, and part of my workshops are having kids create art about how they would communicate about urine recycling to others. And I think it's really interesting how eager they are to draw like what I call charismatic pee of like these, these different drawings of liquid gold, talking about the power of what your bodies create. This is a little animation that Rich Earth created in collaboration with University of Michigan, where Yuri is a Australian accent pea drop who explains the nutrient cycle to you through detailed animations, which the kids find hilarious and also interesting. Just some other kind of collaborative things Rich Earth has done in the past. Last year in our demonstration garden, my colleague Gretchen and some others fertilized indigo dye plants with urine and produced these beautiful blue fabrics out of it, which is something we're really interested in exploring more in terms of maybe you're hesitant to eat directly a tomato or some other food plant that was grown with urine, but the idea of creating dye that can make beautiful art or banners that's powered through what people term a waste, I think is kind of a fascinating idea. Our colleagues at Point of Shift, which is a compost toilet organization, hosted a toilet fashion show to unveil their new line of compost toilet seats. And so I went as part of that to walk our urine collector in collaboration with them. We also made a little piece. There's a fairy house festival in Brattle near one of our urine depots. And so as part of our community outreach for that, made a little recycling fairy house. All right, I'll wrap it up. Just wanted to quickly spotlight over at Cornell University, there's a really cool organization called the Soil Factory that hosts art residencies and other programs. And we've been working with this Cornell team on a current research project as well. And just a poem from my colleague to end. To pee responsibly, bodies aligned in reciprocity, is to hold firmly the seed which will feed us eternally. All right.
Thank you, Julia. That was wonderful. Next up, we have Courtney Brown, who has a background in climate change policy and social entrepreneurship, among many other accomplishments. She was founder and castings director of Common Compost, which was dedicated to local food recycling and local organic compost. They collected food waste, vermicomposted it with earthworms, then distributed the compost all hyper-locally. They also manufactured flow-through worm bins. Common Compost has since morphed into squirmiculture. Now she is the co-founder of California Alliance for Community Composting. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Christina. And I'm excited to be here. One of my favorite things to talk about is worms. I usually show up at conferences, and on my name tag, I say, ask me.
Excuse me, can you do the slideshow? We're seeing, yeah.
Yep. I was going to just share this
Okay.
to begin as my title slide. So usually I just show up at a conference with a name tag that says, ask me anything about worms. This was a painting my friend did for me, Jessica Mathias, in response to just my eternal gratitude for worms, called the Worm Symphony. So I just wanted to share that to start out. And I always like to start out with a little fun fact here about worms. And did you know that worms have 5 hearts? And that means that basically they can show us how to love the earth 400 times better than we're already doing it ourselves. So I'd like to just go through and explain how that process actually happens and the symbiotic relationship that they can have with humans. This is a curriculum that I designed for school children, so it is primarily done with cartoons. So a lot of people ask me the question is, do you think that vermicomposting really can be that stink-free composting solution that we're all kind of dealing with in our garages, in our green bin systems with the city, or with some backyard pile that is barely managed properly? And my answer is always yes. If you're doing it the right way, worms will do most of the work for you, and they eliminate the entire smelly mess that a lot of compost piles can get themselves into. So just briefly, for those that aren't familiar, vermicomposting, also called vermiculture, is basically the process by which worms and other microorganisms convert vegetative food material. They can also take meat, dairy, and eggs if it's pre-processed, and they turn that material into a nutrient-rich humus. So they're basically recycling the beneficial minerals available in food waste that we need to strengthen our soil. They've been doing it for 4 billion years. So when we talk about biomimicry, I believe it really started here with the lowly earthworm. They also are working in symbiosis with other animals that are in the compost pile themselves. So other decomposers like roly-polies, like ants, and then other microorganisms too, like fungi and bacteria. So really, I like to say that the proof here is that a lot of municipal compost programs are actually offering out free worm bins to residents to try to encourage them to try this at home because it's incredibly easy. It also takes off a lot of the demand on municipal compost systems that are already overflowing. And then it also gives you your own compost product that if you have a small home garden, you can use there right at home. So we never actually give that nutrient away, send it out of our community, process it in very industrial methods that actually ruin a lot of that healthy humus, and then it never really does come back to our garden. Composting is also really easy and efficient. If you generate about 5 pounds of food scraps per week in your home, which is the average percent or pounds that a single person does, it will take you about 30 minutes a week to feed your worms and about 1 hour every 3 to 6 months to harvest your castings. So it really pays for itself in time. If you process over 100 gallons per week, so say you're a small kitchen or you're a restaurant or you're a cafeteria at a school, you will spend at least 1 hour a day, so about 5 hours a week, and 2 hours a month for harvesting your castings. And like Christina mentioned, I used to make flow-through worm bins that we would put out in the schools. So the next question that people ask me is, what do you feed worms? So I created this really easy, yummy, and yucky list and put it on magnets and gave it out to households so that they could put it right on their refrigerators. We recommend keeping your compost pail in your freezer. And there's 2 reasons for this. It'll eliminate the smell and the flies. So, well, it's sitting out on your counter. And also, while it stays frozen, this actually starts to break down the cellulose component in a lot of that food, makes it easier to feed the worms once you're ready. Also, worms don't have teeth. So the smaller that you can make that material, the more bacteria can form on the surface area. And all the worms are doing is sucking the available bacteria. They aren't actually eating your food. So what I like to do is actually put all of the good, yummy list into a Vitamix or any regular blender and make a worm smoothie and feed my worms like kind of a mush on a nice layer and then cover that up with dirt. So we like to say the smaller you can make that food, the better. Also, a big component of this is the frequency and the volume at which you feed. the worms. Now, the age-old saying is that worms can eat their weight in a day. Well, an average worm bin at home has about 5 pounds of worms in it. So you can put about 5 pounds of food in that a day. But they, again, are only going to eat it as fast as it is able to decompose. So if you put a whole banana peel, they're not going to be able to eat that in a day. They can only eat the bacteria that's decomposing that banana peel at a frequency of time. So put it in a blender, make it small, and then never have the smoothie weigh more than there are actual worms in your bin. And if you do that on a daily basis or a weekly basis, then you shouldn't run into any problems where food is just sitting in there and not getting digested. Also, all food will eventually break down into something delicious for worms. I know that there are some things there on the yucky list that y'all have probably tried. The only thing that I would definitely stay away from is limonene, which is in the citrus rinds, because it actually has an acid in it that burns the worm's skin. Now, again, worms do not have lungs. So they breathe through their skin. And so the biggest part of how a worm lives is making sure that you're keeping it in an ecosystem that is perfectly moist. So not too wet. This is when too much oxygen and they are hyperventilating. You'll see a symbiotic relationship of this when after a rainstorm happens, a lot of the worms come and crawl out onto the sidewalk. That's because it's too much oxygen. And if your worm bin is too dry, you're actually asphyxiating your worms. They are suffocating. So what we're looking for is to pick up a little bit of their bedding and squeeze it. If you get 1 or 2 droplets of moisture out, that's around about 60 to 80% moisture. That's a perfect temperature, a perfect moisture for them to live. The other really conducive thing is to make sure that the temperature in your bin is between 45 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. We always say, how do my life mimic a worm's? And I would say I can really only survive between 45 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit as well. So this is because below those, they end up freezing if it's below 32 and they'll die, or their metabolism really slows down and they won't eat their food. If it goes over 85, the same thing happens, metabolism, and over 95, they pretty much just overheat. And it's also really key to keep good ventilation and airflow going there so that you don't get pockets of anaerobic digestion in your worm bin. And what this does is produce bad bacteria, which the worms do not eat. And that bad bacteria won't kill your worms, but it will produce an odor, which will attract pests that love worms to your worm bin. Once they get there, they think they're going to get some, decaying, gross, yucky food, and then they find 5 pounds of worms. And it's like Thanksgiving dinner. They invite all their friends, and before you know it, you've got no worms left in that worm bin. So ventilation is good. And then also worms don't really like light. So you need to keep it properly covered with some newspaper over the top or a good lid on it. And basically it needs to be dark. It's really helpful during harvesting. When you're ready to harvest, there's a few ways that you can go about getting your castings. The first is use light to your advantage. I like to take all of the castings out of the bin, put them on a tarp, make it into a cone pile, and slowly pick away from the cone from the top down. And the worms will work themselves into a big ball in the bottom, and then you can scoop them up and put them back in your worm bin, and then what is left on your tarp is all of the available worm castings. It's honestly the most efficient way to do it if you just have a small bin. But our flow-through worm bins is where you're always constantly feeding through the top, and then there's a harvesting bar at the bottom, which will slice off the bottom 2 inches of the worm bin. It's open on the bottom, and those castings fall through, and then you can now separate your active composting area, which is always on top, between the worm castings, which are heavier, more dense, and wetter, and which fall to the bottom. And then you can take those off from there. So the worm castings themselves, there are 5 coolest things that I think there are about worm castings. The first is that their excrement includes over 60 micronutrients and trace minerals. That means that this is the ultimate black gold. It's got the calcium, the magnesium, the nitrogen, phosphates, potash, but it is in that molecular biological and soluble nutrient version of that. So you're getting the purest form of all of those micronutrients. The second thing is that castings can act as a buffer to help plants grow where the pH levels are either too high or too low. So it makes it impossible for plants to absorb those nutrients. So these castings really allow it to secrete the nutrients and balance the pHs as the plant actually desires. So the plant gets to be the teacher and the castings become the student to what they need. The castings themselves are a humus, and that can also extract any toxins or harmful bacteria out of the soils, and which in turn will help your plants fight off plant diseases. They also have the ability to fix heavy metals, and then make those biologically available to the plant when it's ready. And the last coolest thing about them is that it has an enzyme in the worm castings themselves, which is a natural repellent to white flies, aphids, spider mites, and molds and mildews. So a lot of folks like to take the worm castings and make a worm tea and spray it on plants that are either sick or diseased or have those common pest problems. So if you live in San Francisco, worm casting tea is probably your best gardener's friend. And lastly, a lot of the reasons that I think that people think that worms are awesome is just like any other compost, you can easily apply it to your land. You can use it for germinating seeds, you can use it for making worm tea, or you can use it for transplanting bare root trees and building up orchards. But why I really think that the worms are awesome is that it makes it really easy for the average person to pitch in and make a difference with the food waste conundrum we have gotten ourselves in as a society. And just one more paragraph to give you all. So by offering worms your leftovers and doing it at home or locally, their little bellies can magically cycle those nutrients back into our local resources and help that same soil grow for plants again and again. And every part of what you do here can actually help improve the municipal compost systems and make those a little more decentralized and also provide a healthier end product. So yeah, basically worms eat your food scraps, they make poop, and they've been doing it for 4 billion years. So I'm not sure that anybody else can actually do it better than them. Thank you.
Great, Courtney. Okay. All right, so next we have Maru Garcia, the juror for the exhibition. She's a Mexican LA-based artist chemist working across art and science and environment. Her methodology combines laboratory and fieldwork tools from her background in plant chemistry and the pharmaceutical industry. Her areas of interest are biosystems, multi-species relations, and the capacity of living organisms, including humans, to act as remediators in contaminated sites. So welcome, Maru.
Thank you so much again. Yeah, I am very excited to talk about this part of my practice. As I mentioned at the beginning, I've been working a lot on soil, what we can do as humans to try to heal our soils, especially here in LA. Very briefly, I'm gonna say that there's been a lot of contamination spread through the city in an area that received all this contamination from a company that was doing battery recycling. Now with the fires, we're facing more of these contaminants in the air that will are getting deposited in the ground, and we just need to do something. So part of my practice is related with that, on how to heal the soil and heal our communities. But today I'm going to talk about another part that is really connected, which is this symbiotic or relational practice. I will want to, I don't know, oh, sure. Oh yeah, there you go. I don't know, it's very frequent when we see things that are related with environmental movements and like how to be better at like in our ways. By the way, thank you so much for the previous speakers. Like they're like right now opening my eyes to other things to do to getting symbiosis with other parts of my life. But it is usually that I see that people are invited to just keep the arts, right? Like the minimum, okay, at least reduce, reuse, recycle, and we're gonna be okay. And it's been demonstrated that that's not enough, that a lot of the things are not even recycled. So then there is like more R's to add to the list, which are repair, repurpose, rot, refuse. And I'm liking it more, the refuse part. But then I think that we still need more R's. And these are the R's that I have in my list that are starting with relate. That's part of the relationship that we have to develop with other living organisms, or in general with matter. Remember, respect, rethink, reconcile, restore, remediate, and regenerate. So these are the R's that my work tries to address. And I've been, like, as I mentioned, like having as a main focus this part of the relationship and being part of an ecosystem, and how can I, as a human, understand that in a more kind of embedded, embodied way. So I've been doing some series of experiments. As mentioned, I have some background in the science, but now I'm trying to also add this art component and kind of mix them both. And sometimes I bring some of the tools that comes from the sciences to, for example, start protocols. So I started a protocol to how to enter in relationship with, and in this case, I started in 2018 with trying to understand the use of the terrarium, of this like historical elements where people were containing plants, and actually was used a lot for the word case to move plants from one side to the other in the world, and just to create this beauty inside and kind of contained. So one of my first explorations was like, what does that mean? How can we relate better with the rest of the natural world, so we don't think that we are apart from the natural world, that we are inside of it and within it. So I started some explorations with performance, trying to understand if I could be for some time in direct contact with an ecosystem and just like have this moment of interaction. What would that be? And I did a couple of this like performances, but more like moments of engagement in which I was like, for example, in this case, having a time to spend with a tide pool and try to understand what are the elements of this little ecosystem that was forming this little bubble. So it was a beautiful moment. I had a couple of times where a big wave came and then our bubble was kind of destroyed, but it was a good way to start learning about this interaction of matter, energy, and all the cycles that can be when we see the world, and try to make it smaller, so I can understand better. Anyway, so continuing with explorations, I was first introduced in 2018 to a very important culture that is very widely used now for making this drinks called kombucha, which are made of what is called a SCOBIE, which is symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And what they do is basically we have a tea with sugar, and this culture will process it, will ferment it, and will produce the kombucha. In my case, I was interested in the cellulose, bacterial cellulose that is produced in the top. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but it looks like if you have a culture, and you will see it in some of my slides. it grows on the surface of a tank. So I've been exploring a lot with that culture, with this symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And for this specific piece called the culture, what I wanted to do is starting observing through a protocol the introduction of my culture to this culture. So I had different containers that had different names that will have an input from my part. So one will be called identity, and I shed a little bit of my hair. Another one of the tanks will be called love, and I will sing to that tank a song that my mom used to sing when I was little. And so I had these tanks for a long time, and I was like caring for them and adding these parts. And the idea was to see how the tank will respond to me. And it was a beautiful thing. I was able to spend, I think it was like 3 months doing this. And at the end, it culminated in an exhibition where I had the time to harvest these films and with these sculptures integrated, um, the SCOBIE culture and my culture. So with this, I felt that it was not enough. And I got this idea of what if I actually get myself into the tank? So in the culture, one of the ramifications of that piece was that I had an opportunity to make a very big tank of SCOBY and get myself in and spend some time in a meditation, kind of the same situation as the vivarium piece where I was just inside. I didn't need to perform anything. I didn't have to do anything else but just be in. So that helped me to understand and experience other culture in a more physical way. And it was an interesting moment to explore that part. Later on, I had the opportunity to, I had a commission piece by the Los Angeles Municipal Art Gallery. In this case, it was a solo show where I proposed the idea of getting back to this relational part now through family history. So sometimes when we see that someone is related with us, we can be more caring. So I thought, like, what if we understand the origin of all living beings, that it's actually the same origin and how we are all connected and we are the same family. So that's how Member Intentions came. And this is an art piece that is an installation that had also a performance part. It consisted in different tanks. As you can see, there's one that contained the same SCOBY culture that I mentioned in the previous experiment and the previous piece. And the idea was to have these sculptures through time and to be harvesting these films that were in the top so we can see how through time us feeding the culture will come back with the circles that we will collect through the exhibition. The idea was to bring to our attention how we share this origin with other living forms, thinking also on the theory about how membranes are so important for the origin of life. And these are also some of the tanks. And before I forget, this films were collected and placed in the back of the big doors of the gallery where we started collecting all the different films. But besides that part, I had this other part where I was talking about the importance of the membrane. And as I was saying, the membrane as the origin of life and how the membrane is a place of interaction instead of isolation, how the membrane is a place of relationship. So I started to make these sculptures, trying to think of the original cells that were formed and that are like kind of the ancestral and for all living beings, including us. and how this will like create the membrane and have and be in relationship with the rest of the liquid that is around. And there is also another theory about how living organisms, well, cells were replicating, and they were also kind of evolving, not just through competition, but through collaboration. And that was another thing that I was thinking through when I was doing this the sculptures, on how, for example, the engulfing of one cell inside the eating the other one will create a new cell that now works in symbiosis and are a new unit. So these are kind of like the thoughts that were behind that work. These are some drawings of that process of one cell eating the other one, and that is a new unit, and some of the materials that were shown in that exhibition. And finally, I want to talk now about something that it's in the same line. It's using this relationship that I built through the years with this SCOBIE. And the idea was to collaborate with the living organisms and a store, clothes store that contacted me for this. And the idea was to build something using the harvested cellulose that the bacteria made. So yeah, like the idea was to think in alternatives, alternative futures, when extraction, resource depletion, and climate change are a reality. I'm going to read this part. We need to find ways to cohabitate, collaborate, and make a sense of place with other organisms. So the question was, can we think of a future where our environments are grown instead of extracted? And the idea was to make a geodesic dome entirely covered with bacterial cellulose, made with panels with bacterial cellulose stretched. And this was the process was basically having 16 containers, like you can imagine a kiddie pool, where we could have the cultures, so we could harvest this bacterial cellulose as a material that then could be used for the panels. So it was kind of like an intense process, because I had just experience to do it more in like a small scale, lab scale, and this required like more like an industrial scale almost experiment. But it was a good thing to see that, of course, the proportion of the recipes for SCOBIE, for kombucha, and for in this case for obtaining the materials will be multiplied. But at the same time, the relationship that I already had with the cultures made me go through the different difficulties that we encounter through time. So we we fed the cultures with sugar in a tea. We made a tea for them. And then after 1 month or so, we started collecting these films. And every time that we collected the film, we added more sugar, so another film could be produced. And this is a photo of me stretching one of these films. As you can see, it starts very thick, as in the photo in the left. You can see that it's like a very thick film. But then when it dries, it actually becomes a very thin layer. So there is different uses for this material. It's being used from like other people had used it for like what they call vegan leather, to make like jackets or like something that will be more like a leather application. But in my case, and well, when you use it in that way, you have to really wait for the film to be very thick. In my case, I wanted to show the beauty of the translucent property of a film that is thinner and that is younger. So you can see that those triangles that were the panels, and we are here building the structure that will be living in the store where we built this for a season for this clothing company. And finally, I want to show just like the entire structure. You were able to get in, and it was just for other purposes for showing, in this case, the clothing for this company. But it made us like really think of what are the possibilities of this material for building structures like this. And I can leave there my contact info, and thank you so much.
Hi, Christina, I think you're on mute.
We have a few questions to start the discussion. And Maru, do you have any other life forms that you're eager to work with in the future?
Yeah, actually, while I was talking about this, I forgot to mention that I've collaborated in the past with plants and with algae. This time I didn't bring any of those experiments, but I am right now about to start exploring relationships with lichens. So I'm very excited to learn more about them and see, yeah, how can we learn together?
Great. And Kate, would you like to say anything about how we could possibly have symbiotic relationship with salmon?
Sure, yeah. So the salmon people are what brought me to Beaver, actually, originally. Because in our watersheds that we've been working in the north coast of California, we are in Salmon Nation, and Salmon Nation is super important for many, many different reasons, culturally and as a food source and as a really important source of nutrients. So if folks don't know this, the salmon people are basically gathering all of the marine nutrients, and when they return into their natal watersheds to spawn and die, that's how those watersheds get those incredibly hard to find and really critical micronutrients and the marine nutrients. And that's going all the way back into Idaho. Like everywhere that salmon go, these nutrients have been found in many of our plant species and forest soils, where salmon populations are really thriving. So partnering with salmon to ensure forest health, really paying attention to what we're doing in our watersheds and getting to know our watersheds better, and figuring out there's so many different ways that we as watershed citizens can collaborate to increase our watershed health and try to keep that water on the landscape longer, do things that reduce contamination to those waters, really look at just all the different processes that are happening with the water cycle and how we can, like, whether we're living in a tiny apartment all the way to like managing large scale landscapes, there's so many different interventions that we can be doing to support our own health, watershed health, and then salmonid health, which is super critical for those of us that have salmon in our watersheds, and all species. So salmon are, again, another keystone species, and we really like to just help people understand the needs that salmon have in terms of they need water, they need good clear places that have good spawning gravels, and they need to have access to their streams. So taking the dams down in the Klamath has been a really important thing for salmon health that we're really excited about. And lots of dam removals happening, and we're trying to replace them with little mini beaver dams. It's way more sustainable. So yeah, and there's lots of folks doing amazing work with salmon out there. So just anywhere that you are, any kind of, anadromous fish that come and, go from the ocean, they're a really good person to work with and support so that we can restore our watershed health and our own health as well.
Great. Courtney, next question is for you. Are you aware of any successful systems using earthworms to process human poo?
Oh, yes. This is actually what first inspired me to get into worm composting. I was working on an international development project in Sri Lanka, and we were really focused on fertilizers for the banana tree. They have one of the last indigenous banana trees left on planet Earth, and they wanted to, as a small island developing nation, keep Monsanto out of Sri Lanka and save the banana tree. But in order to do that, they also needed to create their own fertilizer. So the city of Colombo, which doesn't have a septic system and a sewer system that is advanced as it is, in developing countries, actually was bringing all of the wastewater treatment material to a compost facility very close there, and it was just worms, earthworms, eating human manure and toilet paper and turning it into incredibly organic fertilizer, which they would then take up to the mountains and fertilize the banana trees so they could keep it alive, and that's where we are today. So I thought it was really fascinating to see it on a municipal scale first, and hundreds of thousands of worms working together to do this. And so that's what made me come home and literally get a worm bin right after I got off the plane, convinced my roommate to try this. And I was like, if they can do it in Colombo, we can definitely do it in our little apartment. But it also reminds me it's a very scalable solution for working with wastewater treatment and turning that into more organic fertilizers than is currently happening with the biodigesters and anaerobic digesters, which is the way the systems work a lot in the United States. So fascinating, but yes, worms do love manure. They're used on dairy farms a lot as well, with pre-composted dairy manure, and can turn that back into really excellent fertilizer to then put right there on your farms. So you never have to get rid of that cow poop either.
And Julia, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so fascinated by that project. Well, one of the things Rich Earth is researching in terms of like the biosolids that come out of wastewater treatment plants is, well, there's a lot of concerns about their contamination with PFAS. And so we have a current research project with Cornell University looking into making biochar out of biosolids, which can actually remove up to 99% of the PFAS in biosolids, which of course raises a lot of new questions, including like, are they going into the air and is it really safe? And how do we trust that it's safe? So we have like social research and various aspects of the project. But yeah, I think trying to look into ways to help make the conventional system of what's happening with our wastewater flows safer, in addition to kind of advancing the source separation paradigm at the same time. But we're also really interested in, like we're doing community urine recycling, getting more community source separation compost toilet composting going in the US, especially for people who already have compost toilets but don't have a legal pathway to actually compost the solids from their compost toilets. And we've been really inspired by projects like Soil in Haiti, which does, they collect compost toilets and compost them all in these large windrows that they can then turn into soil for farmers there. So looking at like ways that that's actually useful for climate resilient sanitation for the US as well. But there's kind of a long permitting and policy road to making that actually possible. But yeah. I think you're muted.
We'll open it to the rest of you. Does anybody have an urgent question they'd like to ask one of our panelists? Deanna?
I do.
Yeah.
This is for Julia. I'm actually very excited about your project, and I live right outside of Brattleboro, so I would like to meet you, and talk to you. And okay, can you just give me an email address or a phone number, and I'll contact you.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat. That's amazing. What a small world.
Yeah. Well, Christina is one of my bestest, oldest friends, so I'm delighted to be here.
Amazing.
Deanna, did you have a question?
Yeah, this goes out to either of the people who are talking about pee and poo, but so for the urine donors and things, or when you're trying to convince people to get involved in that, or if you're trying to compost human waste with the worms, what are the sanitation issues, or how do you answer? I assume that people might be bringing that up often. I guess Julia, maybe start.
Yeah, well, so for urine, it really depends on if you're doing it at the community scale or in your own home garden. So urine is actually pathogen free, and the World Health Organization has guidelines on how you can use it as a fertilizer in your garden without needing to sanitize it. And these are what we follow in our Urine My Garden guide. But for working at the community scale, we have a permit from the state of Vermont to sanitize all of our urine according to the standards for biosolids. So we have a pasteurizer that heats the urine up and kills any potential pathogens that could be in there. And that makes it, yeah, totally safe to use, especially because we collect urine not just from like urine only fixtures, but also urine diverting toilets that have some potential for cross-contamination. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You can also co-compost urine with food scraps. And if it's a heat food scrap composting, that can also sanitize the urine. And we have colleagues in the Adirondacks at an organization called Compost for Good that have New York State's first permit for food scrap composting with urine fertilizer. And that's the method they use for that.
Wow.
Does that get hot enough with just regular, so you don't have to have additional heat for fabulous, absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, and in community scale compost bins, we actually do see that the addition of human manure or animal manures or pee do help inoculate the pile with those beneficial bacteria that do raise the temperatures and get it that mesophilic area where it is able to reduce the pathogens. It's called PRP, pathogen. Further, oh gosh, help me out, Julia, but it's like further reducing pathogens. It's a type of procedure. One more thing about human manure is that this is the new frontier for compost policy. We have, really gotten excluded from a lot of permitting processes for community scale activities. Composting human bodies now has gone through and been passed in a couple of states, and we're seeing biogas be used for a lot of in-vessel or in-home systems. But a community scale human manure composting project is really something that I'm fascinated to take on in the next couple of years. So
cool.
Yeah, and so we have another website too. It's called compostlaw.org, where we actually explore this policymaking for everyday people. So if this sounds like something that's interested in you, or you're interested in it, you can go to that website, figure out how to, if there are already processes for that in your state, and how to get involved if there aren't, and who to talk to for your policymakers.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions? Then I would like to ask Julia to say a little bit about her friend Bella Culata, who is an artist who is working in Africa somewhere.
Yeah, Bella. So Bella, I actually don't know Bella super well, but she is part of the Cornell Soil Factory Network, and they also have this circular bionutrient economies project in collaboration with some folks in Nairobi. And so she was the one who did, on one of the slides, she made this installation with little toilets that had plants growing out of them as kind of a public art installation at Cornell. And she also made a pea fountain project as a way of helping people visualize kind of what their nutrients can go on to become. And now she's in Nairobi working with folks on urine nutrient reclamation over there.
Great. Okay, any other questions? Then I actually have another question for Maru. In your wildest imagination, what possibilities can you envision from symbiotic partnerships?
Let me think. I don't have a wildest enough imagination at this moment, but I'm really eye-opened, as I said, about like thinking the cycles that we are in. And I'm so happy that now this is a reality, like what we are seeing about our pee and poo. I wish that every time that we design something, we consider this life cycle and we consider how, like, as I think, I don't know who said it, that there is no a way in the things that we produce, in the way that we consume. So my wildest imagination would be probably a place in which we care about the resources that we take and we give in reciprocity. And I think that it shouldn't be the wildest, but will be more like I hope that that's something that we all as humanity recognize that we have to do. So that the symbiosis between what we need, what we use, what we return. So
I think Prava had her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had a question for Maru. So first, I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you so much for sharing this amazing work and all these different symbiotic connections. I came in late because I just got home from work, not because I wasn't interested. But I've been here like about an hour. I wanted to ask Maru, so in looking at these projects and the science, and I'm wondering your strategy for sharing this work, if you share it both in art spaces and in laboratories and in science spaces, and like, kind of what is your strategy in the past or going forward for how to share this work really widely? Thank you.
thank you, Brava, for the question. I love what you're asking because what I so far have experienced is basically entering in the science space and try to like kind of move them from their comfort zone and do the same for the arts. So there is like always a sense of like sometimes not knowing if the project it's art, science, or what it is. And I think that itself is good because probably we're so used to be just like studying this little thing that we like, for example, in the science, when I had the opportunity to like do like pure research and just focus on the extraction of this compound for the plant, like it was very like in a way reductionist. Like I was just like not seeing the entire complexity of what I'm right now wanting to share. So that's one thing. I like to engage with scientists a lot. I collaborate with scientists. And I feel that, yeah, just seeing how they are now with that through our collaboration open to even new questions. Um, I am very excited about that. Like learning that there is other ways of knowing, that there is like the probably in my case through my path of coming from the science to now kind of integrate both. For me was a path of integration and a path in which I didn't need to separate yeah my interest from the sciences and my eagerness to create and to share this type of work. So yeah, I feel that yeah, it's giving everyone an opportunity to explore the opposite. So in the case of the arts, I brought to the gallery like yeah, data and like graphs and things like that that probably sometimes people are not like that used to see in the art scene. Sometimes people ask me, where is the art here? And it's fine. I think that the process itself for me is the art part. The relationships that are built are also part of my art practice. So yeah, I welcome all those questions. And yeah, thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you.
I have one last question for Kate. We're just about when we said that we would be stopping, but Kate, were there ever beavers in Southern California and in the Southwest? And what impact could that have on fire issues?
Yeah, so, when we first started doing our salmon restoration work, as early as 30 years ago, I've been doing it for the last 20 years with my co-director, Brock Dolman. And that was the big question because we were asking, what about beaver to restore salmon? And people are like, oh, they're not native to California. They're not native. All these questions around their being native. And so we had to put a lot of time in with some co-authors to find historic evidence of beaver in California because originally they thought they were only native to the Central Valley and up in the Klamath region and the Colorado River, and that was it. Nowhere on the coast and nowhere in Southern California. And so through that effort, and that affected how they were managed. So they were treated like non-native pests and really not tolerated in a lot of watersheds, especially in Southern California. This argument has not been the case in other southwestern states. Arizona doesn't have a question around they were native, nor does New Mexico, any of the arid west states. So they support them. They're thriving. They go all the way down into the Sonoran Desert. They're in Mexico. They know how to live. They're very adaptable. And so with all the evidence that we found, we were able to rewrite the story and convince the agencies that manage our wildlife that in fact they are native to Southern California. We found lots of evidence, historic accounts, pictographs, a lot of ethnographic evidence and whatnot. There are folks who are still contesting this, but they haven't the same kind of proof that we have. So I'll just leave it at that. So yes, they are native and they are in Southern California. We have them in Riverside. We have them in the Mojave River. We have them down in San Diego and Santa Margarita River and whatnot. So they're contributing to ecological resiliency down there. And so it can work.
Thank you so much, everyone. We did say that we would stop at 6:30. We'll probably stop our recording, but I'm inclined that if anybody wants to hang around, we can still kind of schmooze. I don't know how Mary feels about that, but and I want to make sure that we capture the chat because it looks like an incredible wealth of connections and references and information that's been entered into the chat. So
click the three little dots at the top and save the chat if you want to keep the links and everything. I tried to keep up with all of the wealth of knowledge being poured in as we went.
Yeah. It's amazing. So
thank you all for coming. And just remind you, WEED's vision is to continue for another decade, and that we always are open to new ideas of programs that you'd like to have. And I hope that this is also a forum where you can have new allies for each other on your work. So thank you again.
Thank you, guys. Oh my
we'll
God.
close the recording now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Thanks,
great
everyone.
showing up. I'm so excited about all of your work. It's really wonderful to have you participate.
These are just all of them fascinating and so hopeful and optimistic, work that's actually happening that, in these dark times, shall we say.
Olivia Wilk has been a continued and continued inspiration for me during these times. And Kim Tallbear, of course. But yeah.
Great. Thank you all.
Well, I'm just going to say it's so nice to see you, Carolyn.
Yeah, I'm very glad I'm here.
So we're going to be looking for a theme for our next membership exhibit. So if anybody has some fun ideas that would relate. Kate, I have one last question for you. We didn't have time, which is who created the cartoon? And it's a very wonderful, it's like the beginning of a graphic novel. So I thought it was a
Are you
nice,
talking about this in my background? Which
no,
cartoon are you talking about?
the little cartoon that was used in our advertising, in our promotion about parachuting the beaver.
Oh, that, yes. So that actually was created by our state wildlife agency, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, because they finally realized the value of beaver. And from 1923 to 1950, they moved a bunch of beaver around the state of California. And they borrowed the idea from the state of Idaho, who after World War II designed a way to get beaver into remote wilderness areas, which was literally putting them in wooden boxes with silk parachutes that would open upon impact. So they were tossing beavers in boxes out of airplanes, and they would land and open, and then the beaver would go out and live. And as far as I know, they only had one fatality in the whole program. But it was a whole program that then California adopted and started parachuting beavers into our Sierra Nevada. And so that really happened in the 1950s in California. That was someone's job to fly beavers around and dump them out of airplanes. And that's how we got some of our populations reestablished in the Sierra Nevada. So that image is framed in our the director of the Department of Fish and Wildlife has that in his office. And now that they have embraced beaver and created a whole new beaver restoration program after resisting and kind of mismanaging beaver for decades, it's a whole new era, and it's really wonderful that we've come full circle and are now actually moving beaver back, but not by airplanes anymore. I don't think that's going to happen again.
Maybe there's an artist here or in the weed group or somewhere who would like to continue that idea of the graphic novel.
Yeah, and I highly recommend
That
just looking it up on Google or in YouTube, just parachuting Idaho beavers, and you'll see there's a whole black and white documentary, and it's hilarious. It's like,
Oh,
there goes Mr. Beaver out the airplane. It's really funny. So highly
thank you
recommend
for
it.
telling us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Lovely.
It looks like we're still recording, Mary. According to my screen, this meeting is being recorded. Are we still?
Mhm.
Oh, I
Looks
thought I
like
had